So this morning, I really feel impressed to talk to us about something to prepare our hearts for something. I genuinely believe that as a church and as a people of God, we need to be preparing ourselves for war. We need to be preparing ourselves for war. And I feel there's almost like an urgency about it that for a long time the church has kind of coasted on its laurels, that the church has rested on its place and its status in society, and that's all changing. That's all crumbling now. The last vestiges of Christendom, as it were, are beginning to fall apart, and what's being exposed underneath is that a lot of people were relying on the principalities and the power structures of this world, um, rather than Jesus. And I think that there's a war coming. Now, firstly, the Christian life is not unfamiliar to warfare. When you come to Jesus, the message is that you're coming and you're stepping out from underneath the lordship of the God of this age and the kingdom of darkness and his way of doing things, and you're coming and stepping into the lordship of Jesus Christ. He is the new king, and when that happens, you are necessarily then in conflict with the world around you. You begin to live differently to them. You begin to think differently to them. You begin to act differently to them. And that very process itself brings about conflict between the Christian and the world. This is a natural thing. But I also believe that God is actually bringing about, I believe that what God is doing is in the process of rescuing his church from these ways of doing things that are so entangled with the systems of this world, that there are going to be those within the church, not here, obviously, but out there, those people. It's never us, it's those people. But there's going to be people in the church, who actually are going to love those systems and those means and those ways more than they actually love Jesus. And that's not to say that they're not saved. That's not to say that they don't love Jesus, but there is an allurement that comes from power and these certain structures and traditions that are sometimes hard to give up. And what's going to happen, I believe, is that God is breaking down those things to move his people back into full reliance and trusting in him. And in that process, there's going to be conflict, and there's going to be division. There's going to be separation within the body of Christ. And I believe that we as a church need to be gearing up and preparing for war. Now, if we're going to be talking about preparing for war, where is our battlefield? Where is our place of warfare? Where are we going to be fighting? We see in warfare, traditionally, when two armies, two nations fight and war against one another, there's traditionally rules to the warfare, to make sure that it's civilized. And to be fair, those are some fair rules, and a lot of the time, okay, we're not going to target civilians, all right? It's only going to be soldiers who are fighting. Or in sort of in the medieval ages, they would actually designate that this is the battlefield that we're going to fight. They would have a conversation beforehand. The two sides would meet and go, all right, so tomorrow at dawn, we're going to go kick this off. We're going to kick it off in the field over here. All right, it's like school kids it's like after school in the car park, we're going to fight. And that's what they do. And the peasantry would come, and they would sit down. They'd bring their packed lunch, and they'd sit on a hill and watch the war. They come and watch the fight because they knew that they wouldn't be targeted because they're not a soldier. There was rules to the warfare. There was boundaries. There was restrictions that this is where you fought, and this is how you fought, and this is the manner in which you fought, and this is why we have I believe it's the Geneva Convention that gives rules and structure to how warfare are fought. You're not allowed to use chemical warfare anymore because of its destructive nature. There's rules and regulations stipulating what types of blades you are allowed to carry into warfare. Right? Because it's better to get cut by this type of knife and not this other type of knife. There's rules regarding all this sort of stuff. But there are times and there are places when the rules go out the window, when things become so desperate, and that a nation can declare what's called a state of total war. A state of total war, where the warfare is no longer to be conducted between the two armies and the enlisted soldiers and the military personnel, but now the warfare is going to be conducted between every man, woman, and child in every place, home, and place of refuge that you can find. There is no place that is safe from war when there is a state of total war declared. Everybody is expected to take up arms. Everyone is expected to fight on every street, on every battlefield, in every home, in every basement, in every school. There is expected to be a battle, and you are expected to fight. And for us as Christians, this is the state that we are in right now. We are in a state of total war, where there is no place where you will not find conflict with the enemy of your soul. You will find it in the universities. You will find it in the schools. You will find it in the government. You will find it in your homes, and you will find it in your very heart. There is no place for you to escape this war. And for the most part, I feel like so much that we as the church are so unprepared for that kind of warfare. There's people who are unprepared because they're unwilling to be prepared. They don't want to be in conflict with the world at all. They don't see a problem with the world and the way it runs, and they want to happily live alongside it, easy peasy, right? Those people are unprepared. There's some people who are unprepared. There's some people who are unprepared because they think that they are prepared. They think, good, war. I love war. I'm jacked. Let's do this. I'm going to go fight some battles. I'm going to go off some, I'm going to get some victories for Jesus. And they go about and do so in an unhelpful way. For some, their warfare is an escapist mentality. That for them, salvation is, well, one day we're just going to all get out of here. So what's the point? Let's just let the world burn. And if your view and conception of salvation is a destination rather than a vocation, something that God is doing in you, He's restoring you to being the image bearer of God that you were always meant to be, then you may have this escapist mentality that, well, we just need to remove ourselves from the world. We need to move out to the desert. We need to start a monastery and just keep ourselves separate from the world. And so we need to be prepared. We need to be prepared for this war that we are not only going to fight, but we are presently fighting. And so that brings me to my next point. If we are at war, how are we to fight this war? You see, every kingdom and every nation has their doctrine of warfare. Every kingdom, every nation has their doctrine of warfare. And you can study history and you can see. And basically all this is how is our army and how are our forces going to dominate and wrest control over land and territory and resources from the enemy. Right? So the Roman Empire did it with the Roman legionary. The Roman legionary, the highly trained soldiers who worked incredibly well as a unit. And as they marched across the battlefield through teamwork and cohesion, they were able to slowly steamroll sometimes a more powerful enemy because of the way that they were trained. The Macedonians had the phalanx, where they just had this wall of spears that was almost impenetrable that they would then attack the enemy with. The Mongols wrested control over so much of Asia because of their horse archers and their incredible mobility. Genghis Khan, to put it in perspective, Genghis Khan had such an impact on the world's population by the amount of people that he killed that you can actually measure it in the greenhouse gases that decreased during his reign and rule. He killed that many people. They can measure it in the ice, in the I don't know what the slices, the what? Boreholes. Thank you, engineer. All right, the core samples, boom, getting there. All right, but they can measure it. They can measure it. Genghis Khan was incredibly effective at conquering and dominating and exercising his rule. Every single kingdom has it. The British Empire during the Age of Exploration, and they had their navy and they had their fleet, with which they wrest control over the seas. The U.S. empire and the drones. Let's let that one sit. And lo and behold, Jesus, as a king, has his own doctrine of warfare as well. The kingdom of Jesus Christ has a doctrine of warfare. But it's not the same kind of warfare that this world wages. I want us to take a moment to actually observe how Jesus brings about his reign and his rule. You see, because all throughout the Old Testament, there's all these messianic prophecies. There's all these messianic promises that he will come as a king, and all authority and all dominion and all rule will be given to him. In Daniel 7, when you see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of fire, he comes and he takes the place of the little horn. The little horn that sprung up amongst the 10 horns and ends up overthrowing them. And this Son of Man comes before the Ancient of Days and is exalted to the throne of glory and is given all power and all dominion. Psalm 110, the most quoted psalm in the New Testament, talks about this priest who comes and he will rule as a king. And so it is no wonder when you get to the New Testament and the disciples who are looking for a Messiah, they come looking for a king in the way that they've always recognized a king. Now, the Jewish religion, the Jewish people in the first century is by no means a monolith. Not everybody thought this way, all right? But quite a number of them did. Quite a number of them did. Even Jesus' own disciples up until the time of his crucifixion. Do you ever wonder why Peter is carrying around a sword still, and when they come to take him, he whacks a guy's ear off? Because Peter the whole time is ready for this thing to kick off. Jesus, when are we kicking off this revolution? Huh? When is this happening? We're going to do this now? Jesus doesn't wage warfare according to the ways of this world. When you read through the book of Matthew, Matthew is trying to show you that all this imagery of the conquering king, this king who has come to implement his reign, his rule, his dominion, is actually being exercised in Jesus Christ at that very moment. If the kingdom of darkness rules through tyranny, rules through destruction, rules through oppression, then when you see the life of Jesus, you see every healing miracle, every act of provision, everything he does as an act of warfare. And that woman who's hunched over for 18 years, and Jesus heals her. And the Pharisees get upset because he does it on the Sabbath. And he's like, how is it that you see this daughter of Abraham bound by Satan for 18 years? How are you upset that she got healed on the Sabbath? Every act that Jesus did in his ministry was an act of warfare against the kingdom of darkness. And then in this beautiful illustration, the Gospels actually show the Lord Jesus Christ ascending to his throne. And not in the way that we traditionally would think about him ascending to his throne. When he's handed over, and they beat him, they trial him, they put him on trial, they beat him, they persecute him, they whip him, they spit on him, they clothe him with a robe. They're mocking him. They put a crown of thorns on his head to mock him and to ridicule him, to make fun of him. But there is the Lord of glory, the very Son of Man coming on the clouds of fire, and he is ascending to his throne. And then he goes to the cross. And it is from that place that Jesus reigns and rules. And it's interesting, in John 18, when he's standing before Pilate, and Pilate's interrogating Jesus, and he says to him, I'm not a Jew, am I? Pilate replied, your own nation and chief priests handed you over to me. What have you done? He says, Pilate went back to headquarters, summoned Jesus, and said to him, are you king of the Jews? Right? Pilate's trying to assess whether or not this guy's a political threat. Right? Because if this guy's an insurrectionist, right? If he's trying to whip up a rebellion here, this is going to be good information for him to find out. He says, so are you a king? Are you claiming to be the king of the Jews? Is this what you're saying? Jesus answered, are you asking this, or have others told you about me? He said, I'm not a Jew, am I? Your own nation and chief priests handed you over to me. What have you done? Jesus says to him, my kingdom is not of this world. Jesus, if my kingdom were of this world, my servants would fight so that I wouldn't be handed over to the Jews. But as it is, my kingdom is not from here. Now, there's two ways that you can kind of go with it, understanding what he's trying to say there. One, you could say that, well, his kingdom's not from here, so his servants aren't around. That's one way to read it, right? My kingdom's not from here, so my servants aren't here. If they were here, they'd fight. What I think he's saying, though, is that my kingdom is not from this world. My kingdom doesn't operate by the same principles that your kingdoms operate by. And because of that, my servants don't fight when I'm being handed over. And the reason why I'd be led to go with that interpretation is because later on, when Pilate stands before the crowds, he says, after this, he went out to Jews again and told them, I find no grounds for charging him. You have a custom that I release one prisoner at the Passover to you at the Passover. So, do you want me to release to you the king of the Jews? Pilate kind of recognizes that this is kind of a stitch up from the Pharisees, that this is a politically motivated situation, and he's trying to appeal to the crowds to kind of get Jesus off because he recognizes he hasn't done anything wrong. But interestingly enough, what happens here is that the Jews say this. They shouted back, not this man, but Barabbas. Now, Barabbas was a revolutionary. Other translations will say Barabbas was a robber or a highwayman. Barabbas was an insurrectionist. And in all likelihood, Barabbas was probably involved in some kind of anti-Roman political activity which involved murdering and robbing Roman officials. And the reason why the Jews want Barabbas and not Jesus is because Barabbas represented what they really wanted. When Jesus comes into Jerusalem and they're all laying palm fronds on it and he's walking in, it's the triumphal entry. There's a very real expectation that he is about to start a revolution, that he is about to overthrow the Roman Empire. And the reason why they turn so quickly on him is because as he ascends and as he goes into Jerusalem, he spends some time there and then he goes back out. And people become disillusioned with him because he refuses to fight. He refuses to overthrow the Roman Empire in the way that they wanted him to overthrow the Roman Empire. And so why am I talking about all this? Why am I mentioning all this? If we're called to warfare because we're at war with the kingdom of darkness, why am I harping on the fact that Jesus is committed to reigning and ruling in a way that the kingdoms of this world do not reign and rule? Because the doctrine of warfare that Jesus presents is the doctrine of warfare that we need to adopt when we wage war against the kingdoms of this world. This is so important that we get this and we understand this. Because you see, it's been the last, 1,700 years or so that the Christian church has used the power of the state to reign and rule over people. They've used the stick to reign and rule over people, to implement their way of life. Now, I'm not saying the past 1,700 years of Christian church history are trash, or that there wasn't a lot of good and well-meaning people in those times, and that God didn't do amazing and profound things, pouring out His Spirit in revival or any of that sort of stuff. But in our day and age, because of what I can see God doing in His church, I want to raise our awareness to the fact that the weapons of our warfare are not carnal. They are not the same weapons that people have previously used. They are not the same weapons that are used in this world. Paul will say in Ephesians 5, he says, Put on the full armor of God so that you can stand against the schemes of the devil. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against rulers, against the authorities, against the cosmic powers of this darkness, against evil spiritual forces in the heavens. So I'm going to start with this as the first principle of warfare. People are never your enemy. People are never your enemy. Now, they may be presenting as your enemy. They may call themselves your enemy. They may want you to think that they are, in fact, your enemy. But from the perspective of somebody who lives inside the kingdom of Jesus, they are not your enemy. However it is you fight, they are not to be a casualty of war. They are not to become a victim of your victory. So how do we prepare then to fight the good fight? How then do we prepare to fight in the way that Jesus fights? In simple Sunday school terms, we do it like Jesus did. Jesus implemented his own doctrines of war. You've heard it said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, but I tell you, pray for those who persecute you. Bless those who curse you. If somebody takes your coat, give them your shirt also. If somebody forces you to go a mile with them, you go ahead and you walk 2. Make it so that as they are attempting to take advantage of you, you turn it into a blessing so that they are no longer wronging you. Be unoffendable. Be unwrongable. Be so willing to lay down your life in the love and service of other people that no matter what they do to you, blessings come back out of your mouth. Goodness comes from your life and your action. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil, not by being evil back, but by overcoming evil with good. To do that, we need to war from a place of lowliness and humility. And be determined that no matter what we do, we will never pick up the stick to beat people into submission with it. Jesus' kingdom does not reign and rule through the stick. Jesus' kingdom does not spread and grow and flourish through the use of the stick. And so what does this look like? What does this look like? It means, now, we don't really kind of struggle with this in Australia because by and large the church has moved past this idea, right? But it means we don't raise armies to go and fight other countries to make sure that our religious beliefs can be upheld in those countries. This is what happened in the Middle Ages. We don't go and raise armies to go fight for our religious beliefs. It means that in the political sphere and arena, we don't seek to legislate people into being good moral people. Now, I want to be careful with how I sort of structure this and phrase this, right? Because in our current iteration of the kingdom of this world, the kingdom of this world is asking our input on how they should run things in the democratic system, okay? In the first century, that wasn't the case. Caesar wasn't going, oh man, I really want to know what the Christians think about how I'm ruling. The governors and the proconsuls weren't going, man, it'd really be great to get some positive feedback and some constructive input into running the empire. And, no, it was our way or the highway or the point of the sword. And in a very real way, the kingdoms of this world will always advance their agendas and their culture at the point of a sword. But not God's kingdom. God's kingdom doesn't work that way. And so in your political involvement, I want to encourage you to be very wise about how you use your vote. Be very wise in how it is you're engaging the political system. I'd encourage you to be very wise in how you speak about those who are in present leadership over our city, our state, over our nation. Because no matter how you feel the government is currently managing this current crisis and situation, no matter where you fall on the spectrum, whether you feel that they're not doing enough or you think that this is communist Russia and that this is like the peak tyranny, right? No matter where you fall on that spectrum, it is my conviction that as a believer, you have no right. You have a right to do it in a free society. But as a Christian who's seeking to honor and exalt the lordship of Jesus Christ, that to go on social media and slag off our current premier, to just name call, that's picking up a stick. Now, whether they're doing something right or wrong, that's not even here in the discussion. But when you try and pick up a stick and beat someone into submission to get them to do what you want them to do, that is not the way the kingdom advances. Now, so what that means is that we war from a place of lowliness, we war from a place of humility, we war from a place of love. Now, practically, what can that look like? How is it that the kingdom of darkness is going to be overthrown if we are not willing to pick up a stick and throw it over? As that saying, the only thing to stop a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. And in the kingdoms of this world, that's sometimes true. How are we going to stop and change the very face of this nation? I can tell you right now, it's most likely not going to be through legislating people into being moral. Puritan England tried that. Plenty of places have tried that. The way it's going to work is that Christians realize that our power doesn't come from this world, but our power comes from Jesus and the love that he brings and the heart that he reveals. And so what this looks like is this, right? So let's say as Christians we take issue with abortion, and we should, right? Abortion is evil. It is murder, right? We should take issue with it. And in our current climate, we should be petitioning our government to change the laws. Now, I may just sound like a hypocrite just then, right? I think that murder should just be illegal, right? Is that going to stop people murdering their babies? Well, they were doing it before it was legal. Now it's just more in the open, right? And if they're not going to kill their babies, if they're not going to have an abortion, then that child's going to be brought into an environment. Most likely where it's unwanted. It's going to be treated poorly, right? Now, I'm not using that as an argument to say, well, abortion is sometimes okay if that's the case. But as Christians, we should look at the situation and not just go, no, you can't do that, but then also don't simultaneously look at the entire system and situation that's led up to that taking place and seek to enter into that and fix it through love. Why is it that a mother would feel the need to have an abortion and to end her baby's life? What does it say about the brokenness of our society, the selfishness of our society? We as a people, that this is the case. That's where our warfare needs to be. We need to be entering into those situations and modeling healthy, loving relationship. We need to be entering in those situations and modeling healthy families and providing support and making it so that those people don't ever feel like they need to get to that kind of situation. We need to be rising up and saying, look, we can take these children. If something's happened to you and it's a bad situation, we can help you. We can help love your family, or we can help support your family. The Christian response is not to scold or to chastise people for sinning, but to see their brokenness and what's leading to their destruction, and to enter into that and to bring a solution of love and wholeness and restoration. This is how the early Christians conquered the Roman Empire. This is how they conquered the Roman Empire. They were just so good, so kind, so generous, so self-sacrificial, almost like they were living under the lordship of Jesus Christ. Christians were the ones who started orphanages. They would go and collect the abandoned babies. This is, tantamount to abortion in the Roman Empire. They would go and collect the abandoned babies in the woods, and they would bring them home, and they would raise them as their own. They were the ones who started hospitals to care for those who were downtrodden and oppressed. Those who couldn't afford a doctor, Christians began to care for them and to take care of them. It was through their good works, it was through their kindness and their generosity and their Christ-like love that they began to undermine and destroy the kingdom of darkness in this world. And for us, in our present day and age, I believe that we need to return back to those roots. Return back to those roots and realize that we are only going to advance the kingdom so much as we can lay down our lives in the service of others. Sometimes I feel the reason why people don't like Christians is because Christians will tell other people how to live and then won't live that way themselves. What if we actually, before we spoke truth to power, we actually earned the right to do so by our actions in our lives? What if when the government looked at the church, they didn't just see a nag or a political bloc or a voting bloc that they had to appease, but they saw a people who were hell-bent on blessing the society that they were living in without any quid pro quo, without any kind of strings attached. Doesn't matter if you're a Christian, doesn't matter if you're Muslim, doesn't matter if you're Buddhist or atheist or whatever it is. The Christian church will love you, they will care for you, they will bless you no matter what, because that's how Jesus met people. That's how God feels towards them. What if the first thing they saw is how much Christians love, and then Christians then had a right and a voice to actually speak to government, to speak to the powers that be, and speak into people's lives and go, do you realize that what you're doing here is destructive? That what you're doing here is killing people. It's destroying people's lives. It's sin. The key is that we don't pick up the stick. And you'll know when you've picked up the stick that after you've swung it, somebody is a victim. Now, Satan's going to come along and he's going to try and persuade you that you are the one. You are the one who can carry the stick. Nobody else before has been able to carry the stick wisely, but you can. You'll be the one person who can make that one cutting remark on Facebook. Set the world right. Oh, speaking truth to power. You'll be the one. Oh, if they just gave me all the power. Oh, man, this country. It'd be the new Eden. Every tyrant and dictator has thought that. think Tolkien speaks to this in Lord of the Rings, um, with the One Ring of Power. And the Ring of Power, made by Sauron in the fires of Mount Doom, word of wisdom. You know, if someone's offering you a ring from Mount Doom, probably not a great ring, right? There's one ring of power, and the kings of men got these rings, and they thought, well, if we can just get this ring, then we can set things right. See, Sauron, he's evil. He's evil. So of course he's going to use the power for evil. We're not evil. We're the good guys. But when whoever has the ring, it begins to corrupt them. Because the ring is necessarily evil. It begins to whisper to them. It begins to corrupt them. You see what it does to Smeagol. It does to Gollum, right? Corrupts the very character and nature. And that's what it does with you when you think, I'll be the one. I'm very good at debating. God wants us to recapture this humility, where we are no longer about our rights, but we are about our responsibilities as image bearers in the earth, where we care more about pleasing Him than securing our patch of land for Christendom, where we care more about laying down our power in service of others than trying to gain power for ourselves because we think we're going to use it better than the other guy. Now, for some of you here, this idea of wielding the stick is like a foreign concept to you. Because in your life, in your experience, you've been so beat down by the sticks of this world that the idea that you would have enough self-power to beat somebody else up, or to win some verbal sparring match, or to rule over them in some way, that just seems like such a foreign concept to you. And I would say to you that, yeah, that's actually true. This is, I think, what Jesus says, blessed are the poor in spirit, because the kingdom of heaven is theirs. It's those who are the lowest in society already who are most easily going to be able to grasp this concept. Oh, if I just lay down my power, if I lay down my life for others, if I turn the other cheek, then okay, well, I'm already got nothing in this world. I already have no power in this world. That's easy. It's going to be more difficult for those of you who have power in this world, who have status in this world, and know how to use it. God's kingdom is advanced through lowliness and humility. This is how Jesus came to reign upon His throne, and this is how He reigns and rules right now, because He is the one who is able to reign and rule. He is the one who proved faithful. In Philippians 2, we've mentioned this here multiple times before. In Philippians 2, it talks about the reason why Jesus was exalted, the name above every name, is not because He was God, but because He stepped down in humility, did not count the fact that He was God as something to be exploited, but He stepped down into humanity as a servant, and He went to the cross. And He went to the cross. And because He went to the cross, because He went to the lowest place, God saw fit to exalt Him as the name above every name. So, as I was preparing this, there's just so many different, I feel like I'm rambling. I can see in your eyes, you're like, yep. Because there's just so many different areas that this touches on. And so I'm going to wrap it up like this, because if I was to try and explain all the different ways in which this should play out, I feel, in our lives and the culture and of the church and all these sorts of things, we would be here for hours. But what I want you to catch is this, is one, we are at war. There is a kingdom of darkness that hates you, and its designs and intentions are to bring destruction to you, your life, your family's life, and it's a very real threat. But you don't have to live in fear, because Jesus has conquered them. Jesus has conquered the world. And the way in which you are going to conquer the world is not by getting a bigger stick or a bigger gun. The way you are going to conquer the world is by becoming so enamored with the vision of the kingdom of Jesus Christ that when you let that lordship of Jesus Christ, when you let him speak into every single aspect of your heart and your life and bring it into alignment with his character and the way he lives and the way he reigns and he rules, what it will begin to do is destroy the kingdom of darkness around you. Fathers, if you were to commit to loving your wives and your children in the way that Jesus loves the church, in that self-sacrificial way, not lording them over your family because you're bigger and stronger and your voice has that tone, all right? I have that same temptation. In my house, the tone of my voice somehow gets a better response from my kids than my wife's. So I need to be careful that I am not ruling in my house by the sheer fact of my power, by my stature over my children, but I'm ruling them in gentleness and service and humility. In your workplace, ensuring that your boss is served. If your coworkers are slacking off, you find ways to make up for it. You find ways to serve them and help them and be that blessing in the workplace. To be captured by this vision of who Jesus is and what it is to live in his kingdom. And I just genuinely believe that if you were to take the time to really just go before the Lord and to meditate and say, Jesus, what areas of my life am I picking up the stick? What areas of my life am I being selfish? What areas of my life am I taking advantage because, I know if I ask this person for something, they're a little bit afraid of me, so they're just gonna go my way. If you let Jesus actually work into the depths of your heart, you will notice an enormous transformation. Things he points out and says, you see how you do that? That's not good. That's not my way. I want you to surrender that. I want you to leave that. Watch the way you speak. Watch the way you speak to people. Watch the way you speak about people when they're not around. Watch the voices that come into your head when nobody's around. When you're just by yourself and that person comes to mind and the thing that comes up when you think about that person. Let Jesus even speak into those things and change and transform the very things that come out of your heart. We are at war. But the warfare that the Christian wages is entirely different in nature to the warfare of this world. And I know the church will overcome as she lays down her life for the service of this city, to bless these families, to bless all the brokenness and the hurting that's here. I know the church will overcome because Jesus has already come. He's already overcome, and he reigns and rules from the cross. So I'm going to pray, and I'm going to invite the music team back.